and the question is that the motion be agreed to. And again, before I give the call to the Honourable Kyle McGinn, I note that this is an inaugural speech of members and ask that we again listen in silence to what he has to say to us. The Honourable Kyle McGinn.
Madam President, I would like to recognise and acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging on the land upon which we meet on today, and also the elders past, present and emerging on the land in the region I represent. I sincerely congratulate you, Madam President, for being elected President of the 40th Legislative Council. Your achievement is more significant in the context of gender imbalance, which sadly still exists in the community generally and in this institution more particularly. It is testament to the contributions you have made to the people of Western Australia in your capacity as Shadow Minister in the previous Parliament, the member of South Metro since 2001, and the respect which you are held within these chambers and the broader community. Let me note that during your wonderful representation of the people of Western Australia, you have never shied from supporting the battlers, the disadvantaged and the working class, and the organisations that represent all of these people. I stand here today proud to be making my first contribution to this place and would like to express my gratitude again to Madam President, the clerks and parliamentary staff who have made me feel very welcome and have been helping me out wherever needed. To the people of the mining and pastoral region, I say a huge thank you for your support of the WA Labor Party in the March 2017 election. The support from the community across the electorate was uplifting and provided me with the ongoing motivation to stay true to my beliefs and political principles whilst on the campaign trail. It further demonstrates that the people of regional Western Australia understand that the policies of WA Labor are not city-centric but benefit all people across this great state. During the election, I had the pleasure of meeting many wonderful people across the region. I have lived in the Pilbara region for the last 3 years and have lived in remote and regional Australia for 3/4 of my life. In my time living and working in this electorate as a union organiser representing working men and women, I have witnessed time and time again the impact of the economic downturn in Western Australia has had on local residents who made a conscious decision to reside in the regional mining communities rather than opting for the fly-in, fly-out lifestyle forced upon many workers by multinational resource companies. It is vital that both the state and federal government put their shoulder to the wheel and ensure resource companies put back into the community what they take out, by supporting the community infrastructure, which is vital for ensuring the sustainability of remote mining towns. This means permanent jobs, preference for local employment, training and education of our youth. It also means affordable housing, support for local contractors, and the end the reliance on transient FIFO workforces. Let's go back to a time when multinational resource companies had a corporate responsibility of ensuring sustainable local communities, and when governments backed this position into the hilt. Whilst royalties for region provided a sugar hit, it did nothing to promote long-term sustainable jobs and employment opportunities for regional Western Australia. Local jobs for local workers is the key factor in getting our regional communities back. The mining and pastoral electorate is the largest and most diverse electorate in Australia. It is the economic powerhouse that drives this nation and has many of Australia's largest mines and gas hubs. It is the leading region in the export of our mineral wealth. Despite the federal government's reliance on the mining and pastoral electorate to fill the federal government coffers, the people of my region perceive the federal Liberal government as a government which takes all but gives very little back. The Turnbull government feeds off the wealth generated by the mining and pastoral, whilst areas in my region have some of the most disadvantaged groups within Australia. This includes third world conditions for some Indigenous communities, high youth unemployment and casualised workforce, where many workers are employed by labour hire firms. It is time for the Turnbull government to give Western Australia back its share of the GST and allow the incoming Mark McGowan government the opportunity to fix the mess that Barnett, Nahan and Buswell have left in their wake. Parliament should not be about the politicians, but should be about the debate of ideas and the policies the state government needs to implement in order to improve the life of everyday Western Australians. It is also important for newly elected politicians to articulate their underlying beliefs and principles, which form the foundations for the ideas and policies they will promote in support of the people in their electorate region. I would like to take this opportunity to let the people of Western Australia know who I am, what I stand for, and what my goals are as a member of the 40th Legislative Council. I was born on the 23rd of May, 1988, at Royal Darwin Hospital in the Northern Territory. My parents, Sally Williams and David McGinn, bought a 5-acre block of land on the outskirts of Darwin in a town called Humpty Doo. It was a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, metal-clad shed without air conditioning, and there wasn't much in the way of luxuries. Material possessions came a distant last to the family values, which were installed in my siblings and I from a very young age. I'm the eldest of 3 children. I have 2 amazing sisters, Caddy McGinn and my younger sister, Millie McGinn. Growing up, I could not have asked for a better family or a better place to grow up. My father always worked hard to ensure he could provide an income for the family whilst my mother raised us 3 kids. They had good working class principles. Life was tough, but there was always food on the table. My dad took his cooking trade offshore and became an Australian seafarer, working away for 4 weeks at a time. It was difficult to grow up with Dad, missing a lot of important milestones, and for much of the time my mother did the job of 2 parents. She never complained, and she never missed taking me to training and games for my local rugby league team, the Litchfield Bears. When I was 14, we relocated to Mount Gambier in South Australia to be closer to my mother's family. Whilst attending Grant District High School in South Australia, I soon realised that school wasn't really for me. I was obsessed with becoming a chef and joining the workforce to earn a living. My parents had installed the values of hard work at an early age. I was lucky the student counsellor, Mr. Bell, identified this and managed to get me a traineeship through a local restaurant called Charlie's. At first, I thought I'd made a massive mistake. I was stuck in a corner of a kitchen, scrubbing mountains of plates, cutlery, filthy burnt pots, and all the while getting yelled at for every little mistake and breath I took. After I'd done my time in the scullery, I was finally, bit by bit, given jobs on the tools. I believe that spending time in my grandma Marge's kitchen as a child and seeing my father cook resulted in the passion to follow in their footsteps. I turned 18 and decided that I want to see more of Australia, seek out better restaurants and to continue learning the cooking trade. Leaving home was made a little easier for me when I had my first taste of what a bad employer was. While I was working at Charlie's, I was forced to work overtime without pay, and the employer had the audacity of calling it love time. It shows that the employment model of wage theft commenced long before it became popular with the likes of 7-Eleven, Caltex and the labour hire firms such as Request and Construct used by Jerry Hansen and the building developer Finbar. I've complained. If I complained, I would be penalised financially by getting less shifts on the roster. Being young and naive, I thought this surely can't be the norm for an employee in the workforce. Surely this employer was simply the odd one out. How wrong I was. Not long after my 18th birthday, I decided to pack my suitcase and move to the Gold Coast. I ended up living with my best friend, Sammy Joe Gordon, who I must take this chance now to thank for pestering me to move to the Gold Coast. Because if I had not made that decision, I fear I wouldn't be standing here with you all today and having the life that I have had thus far. I found work in a Mediterranean franchise restaurant called Toscani's on the Gold Coast in Helensvale. The next 18 months was tough. I experienced many downs and many disappointments. I lived over 1 hour and 45 minutes away from my job. It took me 2 buses and a train to get to work each day. If I finished my shift just 5 minutes later than expected, which happened quite often, it meant an additional 1 hour wait for my train and getting home at 1 a.m. As almost every worker who is serving or has served an apprenticeship would know, apprentices are constantly under pressure. My wages were low, and regardless of the hours I worked, I barely made enough money to survive from week to week. I often found myself begging my parents for money just to cover the rent. For that, I felt deep shame. Despite this, I was always positive and believed there was a light at the end of the tunnel. A big step forward for me was the pay rise I was expecting in my 3rd year of my trade. Or so I thought. It was around this time that the Howard government had introduced work choice agreements. I hadn't taken much interest in politics at that time, as I never understood the link between bad working conditions and bad workplace laws. Boy, was I going to get an education. My boss sat me down without representation, and instead of the pay rise that I was expecting, to about $15.50 an hour with penalty rates, he handed me a contract that stipulated I would receive $12 flat an hour, and if I didn't like it, the door is over there. I also have to mention that a fellow apprentice who was under 18, she was 17 at the time, was dealt with the same way. Her parents were not even invited to the meeting. Being young, broke and away from my family, I felt bullied by my employer, but most of all let down by a Liberal government who I had mistakenly thought was there to represent ordinary Australians. I was an Australian apprentice and had been hung out to dry. To make matters worse, not long after this betrayal by my employer, I was then hit with another blow. I arrived at work one day to discover that the restaurant where I worked was all locked up and that the boss had run away. When I rang the boss to find out what was going on, he told me that the business had no money, and because they had mismanaged the business, my annual leave and sick leave that I had accrued during my employment was gone, and I would never see it. I also found out that they had misappropriated my superannuation payments. Feeling like my world had just imploded overnight, I was left running the kitchen for the franchise chain whilst the business was in limbo. It is in this time of my life that things took a turn for the better. At this point in time, there was an upturn in work in the oil and gas sector and an increase in job opportunities. In the great tradition of Australian seafaring, I found myself working as a cook with my father in the offshore oil and gas industry. It was a massive honour and privilege to be given at that time in my life the opportunity to work side by side with my father and become a second-generation Australian seafarer, something I am very, very proud of. I entered the industry with no idea what it was like, and I knew even less what it was like to work under a union-negotiated enterprise agreement. I quickly learnt the values of backing my mates in and knew that I didn't have to look over my shoulder to see if they had my back covered, because they always did. I joined the Maritime Union of Australia when I joined my first ship. The ship was called the MV Marcab. I still remember the day I received my seaman's book from the union. Over time, I learned the true value of having a seaman's book and that exploitive work practices were just as relevant in the offshore sector as was on the onshore hospitality industry. The key difference was that now I had a union to support me and my mates in addressing the wrongs and ensuring the employees had a voice. Nobody enters the workplace intending to be a union delegate. It is the outcome of workers wanting to right the wrongs, to stand up for their mates and ensure the collective voice of workers could match the money and resources of the labour hire firms, vessel operators and multinational oil and gas companies for whom we worked. The oil and gas industry, just like every industry in this country, has its share of exploitive work practices, bad safety and job insecurity. If it weren't for the MUA, working as the offshore cook in the oil and gas industry would be no different to working for Toscanis. If it weren't for the MUA, there would be no jobs for Australian seafarers, as the likes of Malcolm Turnbull and Michaela Cash would have exported our jobs to foreign nationals where workers are paid as little as $2 an hour. The federal Liberal government has consistently attacked the rights of Australian seafarers to work on the Australian coast to appease their multinational masters such as Chevron and Alcoa. Meanwhile, a succession of state governments have allowed our state shipping to fall into disrepair. This is something I will lobby to change. My narrative about the problems facing workers in the maritime industry is a narrative that can be applied to nearly every industry in Western Australia. As a state Labor politician, I won't be hiding from issues on the basis that some of them are influenced by federal legislation. I believe it is incumbent on me to lobby for change to workplace laws that affect every working man and woman in Western Australia. I believe it is my responsibility to argue for improvements in the workplace health and safety, for industrial laws which protect the wages of Western Australian workers, for laws that regulate labour hire firms, laws which stop foreign nationals taking Australian jobs whilst Western Australians are dumped on the unemployment scrap heap, to promote training opportunities for young workers policies which will fill the workshops on the Kwinana Strip and Henderson, to ensure that companies exploiting our resources use WA content in the construction and their ongoing operations, to ensure that builders and subcontractors who break workplace laws are prevented from securing future government contracts. Australia is an island nation which needs to have a thriving maritime industry to ensure border security, job opportunities for Australian seafarers and business opportunities for Australian shipping companies. The federal government has simply neglected the Australian maritime industry. It has deliberately sabotaged Australian content because of its misguided and narrow-minded ideology philosophies. Western Australia, major towns and cities are surrounded by desert to the east and water to the west. Our maritime sector is an integral part of our economy. It should not be abandoned and left to run by foreign business, but should be brought back into the hands of the Australian companies and Australian workers. It is ironic that the Liberal Party, which looks to the United States for guidance and leadership on how it should manage its economy, chooses to ignore a fundamental piece of legislation at the heart of the United States maritime economy. The Jones Act ensures that the US-built and US-flagged vessels are the only vessels allowed to operate on the US coast. We need similar legislation in Australia to rebuild an industry that is vital to Australia's long-term economic, social and industrial interests. We need to ensure Australian content in Australian workplaces, but it is equally important that we deal with the issues that adversely affect workers throughout Australia. I want to bring you back to my workplace experiences. In 2012, I was employed by Program Marine and worked on a rig called the Stena Clyde in Bass Strait. Following a period of leave, I arrived at the start of my swing in Melbourne and immediately sensed that something terribly wrong had occurred on board the rig. We had our flight delayed and was told there had been an accident on the Stena Clyde. That afternoon, we were flown out to the rig, still unaware of the seriousness of the situation we were heading into. The communication from management, as normal, was very poor. Upon arrival, I quickly went to the galley to see my comrades who had swung on to the rig a couple of days earlier. When I saw them, I could see the horror in their eyes. An incident had occurred on the drill floor involving two workers, Peter Meddens, 32 years old, and Barry Denholm, 60 years old. Both workers died on the drill floor earlier that day. Rest in peace, Peter and Barry. They were killed at work doing what every worker is doing, trying to provide for their families. Peter had a young family. His kids will grow up without a father, and his wife will grow old without her husband. Barry left behind his wife, who will also grow old without her husband. What happened next changed me forever. The Stena Clyde was a chaotic place to be when Peter and Barry were killed at their workplace. One was decapitated and one was crushed to death. The rig operator called upon the cooks and the stewards to provide medical assistance to the onboard medic in a valiant but ultimately failed attempt to save the lives of both workers. After dealing with the horror of seeing their mates killed in a violent and totally unavoidable incident, in my opinion, the vessel operator ordered the cooks back to the galley to serve lunch. There was no regard for providing workers with a safe place of work prior to them being killed. There was an equal lack of regard to looking after the welfare of workers who had to witness the gore of two violent deaths whilst trying to save their lives. The same employer denied co-workers of the deceased union representation in the ongoing investigation of the workplace fatalities. The employer hindered and obstructed union safety officers from coming on board to undertake an independent investigation. There is no amount of counselling that can take away the numbing impact these fatalities have had on me. It further reinforced in my obligation I felt to step up to represent my fellow workers and to do everything in my power to stop another family losing their loved one at work on my watch. Similarly, it provided further motivation for me to step up as an organiser for the MUA and now as a Member of Parliament. The fatalities on board the Stena Clyde convinced me about the need to have laws which act as an effective deterrent to employers who put profits before workplace safety. The recent spat of fatalities in WA building and construction industry is even more reason why we need to have effective and industry best practice OH&S regulations in WA. Have effective regulators who prepare to do their job and to introduce manslaughter laws which properly punish business owners and managers who kill workers on a site or at workplace they manage. Since October 2015, we have witnessed a fatality in WA building industry on average every 9 weeks. Every 9 weeks there is a fatality in the construction industry. It's no wonder that we have such a spat of killings on our building sites when we have an OH&S regulator which is little more than a toothless tiger. WorkSafe have no office in the Pilbara, despite it being the economic hub of Australia. Workers are left to call a hotline and report anything that is wrong or unsafe in their workplace. They are then subject to no feedback from WorkSafe and have to apply for freedom of information to get any feedback. It's an absolute shame. Shame on the Barnett government for stripping WorkSafe of its capacity and will to regulate safety throughout WA, and in the mining and pastoral region in particular. The Barnett government dismantled WorkSafe, Karatha's office, despite a spat of workers being killed on a mine and a construction site in the Pilbara, including a fatality on the Hanson's Pelago apartment project. When a German backpacker was killed in yet another workplace fatality on a Hanson Finbar construction site in Adelaide Terrace, WorkSafe turned up on a site more than an hour after the CFMEU safety officials and 30 minutes after the police. Hanson and the owner of Hanson, which builds 34% of all apartments in Perth, refused to stop the concrete pour, despite having a worker fall 13 floors to her death. Hanson's management team had allowed the young backpacker to stand on a plastic bucket whilst placing precariously over a service shaft. There was no harness and no safety in place for the worker to anchor a harness to, even if she wore one. Hanson's projects have been a death trap for 15 years and remain a death trap to this day. They have no fear of WorkSafe inspectors shutting them down and relies upon a transient and exploitable workforce made up of backpackers and labour hire employees to build projects. To show the contempt and other employers have for workers on their projects, I'll read out an email which Jerry Hanson sent to the family of the young German backpacker who fell to her death. Dear family of Maranka, our sincere condolences for the sad loss of Maranka. Be assured we will accommodate her sister and husband with all the needs while here in Perth. Maranka was a lovely and well-respected, dedicated worker and a valuable member in the company. Very sadly, in moments lack of concentration and a dedicated to do the right job, she omitted to harness up and secure herself. She did this job for 15 floors impeccably, and a 30-second lack of concentration caused this fall. Only God would know the answer. All 300 people on site, their thoughts and prayers are with her. We had a Buddhist monk, bless her spirit, on the place of the accident the next day. He said to all of us, if her spirit could talk, what would she say to all of us? His answer was, Maranka would say, I'm sorry for letting you down. To Mum, Dad, family and friends and workmates, we all wish you lots of strength and sympathy at this time of sad loss. If there was ever a fatality which highlights the need to bring in an industrial manslaughter law, it is the latest Hanson fatality. They had the audacity to blame a worker who had less than 10 weeks construction experience for her death. But what does Hanson have to fear from WorkSafe? Absolutely nothing. This is the same organisation who still haven't finalised their investigation and report into the workplace deaths of 2 young Irish nationals who were crushed to death by a tilt-up panel on a Jackson construction site, less than 1 kilometre from where Maranka was killed on the Hanson site. We need industrial manslaughter laws, but we also need a regulator that will do their job of protecting workers. WorkSafe need more inspectors to proactively monitor safety in WA workplaces, and on building sites in particular, we need to ensure WorkSafe inspectors have industry experience. We need to ensure WorkSafe prosecute employers who fail to comply with OH&S laws and not wait until somebody gets killed at work. We need to clean out the WorkSafe hierarchy who have failed in their obligation to properly manage safety in this state. There are people in my life that without their support and encouragement, I wouldn't be standing here today. I will try to name you all and apologise if I have missed anyone, but I do send you my thanks. My grandparents, Marge, Alan, Ducker and Claire. My Nana Lorna and my late Papa Jim, who I miss with all my heart. Without my grandparents, I would struggle to be here today. They have been a great support base to me. To my mum and dad, your love has been overwhelming. To my sisters, Caddy and Millie, I couldn't have asked for two more beautiful sisters. I want to make a note that my younger sister Millie battled cancer at 15 years old. Hodgkin's disease. My sister had the fight of her life. Millie, you are the strongest person I know. She is in remission still today. Caddy has just had her first child and my first niece, Olivia. She is beautiful and a healthy baby, and I know you will be a great mother, Caddy. To all my family, uncles, aunties, cousins, you all, I thank for all your support over the years. To the MUA and all its members, I thank you all for the support over the many years I've been working in the offshore industry and all the support that I received whilst being an organiser in the Northwest. To Chris Kane, I thank you for your respect and the fact that you gave me responsibility and trusted me immensely. You have always believed in me, and that kept me inspired. Thank you, Christy. To my former work colleagues at the MUA WA branch, Gack, Jack, Spud, Danny, Adrian, Jeff, Eliane, Luke, Sarah, Sandra, Georgia, Kylie, Paul, I thank you all. I have thoroughly enjoyed working with you all. The CFMU and all the members, I thank you all for your hard efforts throughout the election campaign and your ongoing commitment to workplace safety and better working conditions. Mick Buchan, I thank you for all your friendship and support. Sarah Maguire, Sue and Kim Stubbs, my adoptive parents of the Pilbara, you are both amazing people. Tamara Stubbs, your friendship has been a huge value to me, and your passion and drive will continue to inspire me. Clayton Brown, you are a through and through union man with a heart of gold. You truly are a comrade for life. To all the candidates of the mining and pastoral electorate, Darren Forster in Kalgoorlie, Shane Hill in North West Central, Kevin Michelle in the Pilbara, Josie Farah in the Kimberley, and in the upper house, Steve Dawson, Peter Foster and Chris Mousley. I thank you all for the campaign that we ran in the mining and pastoral region. Adam Wall, Dave Abbott, Jason Leach, Josh Marmion, Christian and Yanni and their beautiful family, John Peters, the whole branch of the ALP in Headland and Karratha. Tracy Heimberger, your vigour in that campaign across the Pilbara region was second to nobody. I thank you for that. David Fox, Paul Ferreira from the CFMEU, who showed up every day in, day out, letterbox dropping throughout the campaign. Amy and Ant-Man, Scooter, Stephen Thor and Deb, Dina and Ben Lorver. And for support throughout my career, Tim Downs and Des Harding. There's someone here today I want to say a special thank you to. She's sitting up in the gallery. Becky, we met 1 year ago. From the moment we met, I knew you were special. Over the 12 months we've been together, my love for you has continued to grow. You have supported me in all the decisions I have made, even if you don't agree with them. You are my better half, you make me better as a person, and you are my soulmate. For all your support, I say thank you. I hope the speech I have given today helps people to understand who I am and where I come from and what I stand for. I am honoured to have this opportunity to represent the mining and pastoral region and excited to get out in the Kalgoorlie electorate. I don't expect Kalgoorlie to be easy, but as you might have guessed by now, I'm not about taking the easy road and am up for the challenge. Before I take my seat, I would also like to thank WA Labor, especially all the rank and file party members that turned out across the election. Because together, you make this party what it is today. Every day, we are making a difference. Thank you.
Convene that report, haven't we?